Okay, everybody. Sorry to keep you all waiting. Just rushed in a few minutes ago. Okay. How's the sound? All right? Yeah? Alrighty. Oh, Alan, I see you got in. Not sure if you pronounce it Alan or Alin. Alin? Alan? Alright, in any event. Alan. Okay. Very good. Yes, I sent you an email a couple of minutes ago. Alright. Alright, Alan actually asked a question just before we start. He said he was looking at some old videos, and I mentioned something about sponsorship. I haven't done any sponsorships for a while, at least I haven't mentioned it. Anyone who would like to sponsor a class, just get in touch with me. You can sponsor a class in the name of a loved one, in the name of a birthday, or in the name of an anniversary, whatever it may happen to be. So you can get in touch with me and we can take it from there if anyone wants to do so. We'll get a mention at the beginning of the class, and perhaps I'll write something up on the board. But obviously there is no obligation. Okay, so this week's Torah reading is called Bahalotcha, which means, the way it's usually translated, when you light the menorah, when you light the candles, the candelabra in the temple, and Aaron would be the one who would go and actually light the candle. Now, there are various opinions of what the candelabra looked like. The opinion which we maintain is the one according to Maimonides, which is probably the one that most people are not familiar with. The arms on the menorah were straight like that. They were straight. They weren't sort of in a U shape. You can see a wonderful drawing of straight lines over here. Well, you can understand what I mean. I mean, these are supposed to be. Let's draw like this. There you go. See? I don't draw perfect straight lines. Yeah. Right, that's how it went, and there were actually seven branches altogether, 3 on each side, and then the middle branch. Okay, that's how it looked really. That is how it looked. Of course, they all went up to the same height, so that's the way it looked. But they didn't look like you usually see it as. Sort of like this. They usually look like this. That's the way people usually depict them, as U-shaped kind of thing. That's not the way we maintain that it looked, actually. That's the way it is on the arch of Titus after Titus destroyed Jerusalem. So this is what he put on the arch. But our sages tell us that they knew that the temple was going to be destroyed. I mean, obviously the place was under siege, and they were, the Romans were fighting against Jerusalem, and they were a very expert army, and obviously they knew that they were going to lose the battle eventually. So they took the real menorah and they hid it away. They buried it under the Temple Mount, deep under the Temple Mount, along with many other things. And what they left there was a menorah with round arms like this, with half moon arms, or whatever you want to call them, U arms, like that. And that's the one on the Arch of Titus, so that people would know, without obviously having to be told, that the menorah wasn't really captured. This menorah was the one that was depicted on the arch. And that was his victory arch that he built in Rome. And most learned Jews, and most Jews were learned at that point in time, would know that that was not the menorah. So this one was the candelabra, the menorah. All right. In any event, that is. So it's not a very clear color. Can you see it? Can't seem to change it actually. all right? Okay, in any event. Okay, so when we are talking here, this week's Torah reading begins off with the command to Moses, to Moshe, to speak to Aaron and say, when you ascend to light the candles, etc., etc., the 7 candles will shine forth. The 7 candles in this menorah. Now, the word Baha'alotcha, hey, what happened to the Hebrew? It disappeared. What is that? How did that happen? Anyone notice that? That the Hebrew just disappeared just like that? Huh. Oh, what happened there? Oh, here we go. All right. So here we go. This is the line. This is the Hebrew, right? When you speak to Aaron and tell him when you light up the candles. Now, this word Ba'alotcha is a very interesting word, and it has a number of different connotations. This is really what I want to speak about. Well, there's 2 things I want to really speak about. This verse and the next verse. But starting off with this verse. The word Ba'alotcha is from the word, the basic Hebrew root of the word is Ayin Lamed Hey. Yeah, Ayin Lamed Hey, Ale, which means to go up, to ascend. Now, what does it mean when you light the candles in a way of ascension, of going up? So there's various explanations. One of the explanations is that you have to light the candles until they burn on their own. In other words, the flame has to catch properly. You can't take away the support for the flame, so to speak. In other words, the match that you're holding, or whatever, it was actually another candle that was used to light the candles, or it was some like burning branch or whatever it was. Anyway, it can't be taken away from the wick and the oil. The candelabra in the temple was made of olive oil, and very very fine olive oil and wicks, right? So don't take away your match or whatever it is that you're lighting with until the flame goes up on its own, until it goes up, or until it goes up on its own. Okay? That's one of the explanations of the word Ba'alotcha. Another explanation of the word Ba'alotcha, which is again from the word to go up, to ascend, the flame ascends by itself. The other meaning is that in front of the candelabra there was actually a sort of a set of stairs, right? There was a set of stairs which Aaron had to ascend in order to light the menorah. So this is kind of a tricky thing. Why was it that he needed to ascend the stairs? First of all, Aaron was known to be actually very tall. He wasn't short at all. Number one. Number two, the menorah wasn't that high that he wouldn't have been able to reach it without stairs. But he had to have stairs. This is significant. And we'll soon find out why. And then anyway, he has to light the menorah until the 7 candles of the menorah, of the candelabra, will shine forth. Ya'iru, they'll shine forth. Yeah, from the word or. Meaning light. Okay, so all of these explanations might seem a little bit like hair splitting, but they're actually here to teach us some very profound ideas, as we always find with the teachings of the sages. When the sages said something, intending to instruct us, it wasn't just an instruction, the itty-bitty meaning of the words, and the hair-splitting sort of idea, but it was that there are deeper teachings buried in the teachings of the Torah. Obviously, if the Torah is God's wisdom, which is what it's called, it has to be plumbed to the depths in order to understand it. And even King Solomon, who was said to be the wisest of all men, says, I became very, very wise. In fact, it's called Chacham, he called this the wisest of all men. And yet he still did not get to the depth of everything in the Torah. He didn't. Some things he did, some things he didn't. In any event, so there's a lot of depth over here, and there's a meaning. I'm going to discuss a couple of the meanings tonight. So let's first talk about the idea that the candle has to light up itself. In other words, it has to be able to maintain its own light before you take away the helping hand that keeps it alight. Now, why is this significant? Well, it's significant because there is a verse, which I don't have over here, but the verse says, Ner Hashem, Ner, the candle of God, Nishmat Adam. Nishmat, I'm just going to write an aleph here for Adam, okay, so we don't take time away. Alright? Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. God's candle is man's soul, or the way we would say it in English is man's soul is God's candle. Man's soul is God's candle, and there is a expression that sages use that my candle is in your hand. My candle is the Torah, which is compared to a candle. Ner mitzvah the Torah, or the commandments are candles, and the Torah is a great light. Ner mitzvah the Torah, or. So the sages say that my candle, the Torah, is in your hands, and your candle, in other words, your soul, is in my hands. My candle is in your hands, the Torah is in your hands, and your candle, your soul, is in my hands. Is in God's hands, so to speak. Now, what is the comparison of a soul to a candle? Why is the soul compared to a candle? Now, obviously, the most obvious, blatant comparison here is, the one that stands out most, is that the soul of a person is put into this world in order to illuminate the world. We're here to illuminate the world. That's what we do. Or at least that's what we are supposed to do. There's some people that come along and actually darken the world. We know that. But our duty in this world is to be not enlightened, but to light up. Enlightenment is for you. Enlightening is for the whole world. To enlighten, in other words, to brighten up, or to bring light into the world. But when we're talking about a candle, so there are various components of a candle, as I'm sure you're aware, right? There's the oil in the candle, right? There's the oil that goes into the wick, that goes into the little vessel. And then there is the wick, right, that goes into the oil. And then, in fact, there is the flame above the candle, right? There's a flame that's actually where the light comes from. Now, in the flame itself, there's actually two levels, right? If you have a look at a candle, you will see that the flame closest to the wick over here, is actually dark. That part of it is dark. The lightest part of the candle is here. That part. Right? That part is the brightest part of the candle. Now, let's just go from the bottom up, and I'm going to talk until we get to the wick. First of all, you have to have a vessel. That's the first thing. An empty vessel. Right? The vessel has to be empty, meaning to say that, our sages explain that an empty vessel can contain. A full vessel cannot. Which they explain sort of homiletically to mean that a person who is full of himself can never be filled up. A person who is full of himself can't get nothing will be able to come into him because he's so involved with his own ego and his own self-aggrandizing, narcissistic kind of a person, right? He's in love with his own image, so to speak. So the first thing that's important, therefore, is for the vessel to be empty. Not only does it have to be empty, in the whole process of lighting the menorah, we find out that they actually have to clean out the vessels. The vessel can't just be a vessel that was made the way it was. It has to be clean. It has to be cleansed. The vessel has to be purified. It has to be ready to receive, but ready to receive pure oil. And pure oil in the sense that you don't want it to get contaminated or impurified by all kinds of impurities that might be lingering in the inside of the vessel from previous use. The vessel has to be cleaned out, make sure it's very clean. Same thing with a human being. His vessel is essentially his physical being. His physical being is sort of the vessel for the soul. His physical existence in this world. The physical existence has to be cleansed through various means of purification in order that it will be able to contain the pure oil. Dennis is asking, so example of the flame showing us coming from darkness to light. Yes, I'm going to get to the flame in a minute, Dennis. We will get this from darkness to light. Right. We will get there shortly. I'll explain it in a minute. But the vessel has to be cleansed, but cleansing is still not enough. Cleansing is still not enough. It has to be cleansed. Obviously, then into the vessel has to be poured pure oil, right? Olive oil, which is called yitzhar. It's another name for olive oil in Hebrew. Sometimes it's called shemen zayit. Sometimes it's called yitzhar. In the Torah, it's called yitzhar. In some places, yitzhar is from the same word as tzohar. Tzohar means a window or a light, right? Yitzhar, tzohar. The word tzohar, like the word zohar, it's another word for light. Tzohar and zohar, both two words for light. So yitzhar. So that's the oil has to go in order to give light. But again, even the oil, even if it's pure oil, even if it's holy oil, which is really the soul within the body, it's holy oil, but it hasn't yet been lit. It still has to be lit. In order for it to be able to be lit, so you have to put a wick in. You put a wick in the oil, obviously. You put a wick in the oil. And then the oil travels up the wick, right? And then the oil actually burns in the candle. Now, you will notice that when the wick sort of starts off the process of being lit, right? You light the wick, and then there's two, as I said before, there's two. If you look at a flame, you'll see that closest to the wick is sort of a dark light, and above that is the real light, right? The bright light. Now this dark light, which is called in the Zohar, or uchama means dark light. It's light, but it's dark in comparison with the light that's above it. So that dark light represents the energy and the light that comes from burning the wick, burning the oil through the wick. In other words, what is it? It has to do with, it's the light that comes out of the physicality, so to speak. The physicality, the light that is closest to the wick, where the wick is burning, that light is what's produced. It's the heat and the light that's produced by subduing physicality to spirituality, by subduing the physical to the spiritual, by subduing the physical to the soul. There has to be fuel, of course, and the fuel is again the oil. The oil always in the Torah represents the wisdom of God. That's why kings were always anointed with oil on their heads. Right? The oil represents Shemen Mishchat Kodesh. The holy oil represents the wisdom, divine wisdom. So when the divine wisdom, which is innate in the soul, is placed in the vessel, a clean vessel of the body, then the wick, which draws up the oil, the wick is actually the deeds that a person does, start to produce a light. But that light isn't very bright yet. It's only a light and heat, which are from the transformation of the physical into spiritual. But then there's the light above if you have a look at a candle, meditate on a candle, you'll see that the light above that's pure light, right? In other words, that's the light which is essentially the expression of the light of the soul. The lower light, the darker light, is the expression of the light of the body, the light of the physical. The light above is the light of the spiritual. And you'll notice that the candle, of course, you know that candles, however good the oil and the wick are, the candle's always going to be moving up and down and moving up and down. It doesn't stay still really for very long at all, right? And that's symbolic of the way our relationship to, it's symbolic of how our soul works in relationship to God. It's always in a state of flux. It's never really, while we're in this world, while the soul is attached to the body, it's never in a state of, it's never static. It's always in a state of moving. And that's a positive thing, it's not a negative thing. It's always coming up and down, up and down. It's called rato veshov. Running up and returning, or going up to a higher spiritual level and returning. So therefore, when Aaron went to practice this, to put into practice this spiritual labor of lighting the candle, and all that meant, as we just explained, he had to make sure, first of all, that the candle would burn on its own, that it shouldn't need a constant input. You have to put in enough input in the beginning to make it burn, but then you have to step back and let it light on its own. Of course, if it still needs help, you get a little bit more help until it's able to burn on its own. The point being that each candle, the 7 candles of the menorah, represent 7 different types of souls, corresponding to the 7 sfirot, the 7 emotional qualities of the soul. Here, let me just get it from our library. One second, I should have done this before, but as I said, I'm really good here at time. Spirits and soul powers, here we go. Okay. It's not very big, right? So we want to make it bigger. Alright. Now, the ones that we're going to concentrate on over here, these are the ones here. These are the ones here. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Before, if you're reading them now for the first time or whatever it is, you'll see that there's 2. There's the usual translation. There's an explanation of what it is in the soul, and then there's a slash, and after it is the opposite of those qualities. Okay? So these six qualities, soul qualities, are 6 side branches of the menorah, and then there is the central branch, which is called da'at. That represents da'at. And someone's going to ask, what about Malchut? No, Malchut doesn't come in over here. Malchut is the body of the menorah. It's the foot of the menorah. It's not the menorah itself, the candelabra itself. So, those are the 7. If anyone wants, I can send you a copy of this rather than have you copy it down now. But just send me an email, because otherwise I'm not sure who wants it, who doesn't want it. Just send me an email and say, you want a chart or whatever. That's real chart. Okay, so now, yes, exactly. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet. Forgot about Tiferet. Netzach, Hod, Yesod. That's 6 of them, and then the central column is Da'at. Da'at. Yes? Okay. Do we begin? Yeah, good. Okay. So, now, when Aaron is lighting up a soul, when he's how do you call it? He's giving some of his fire to the soul, to the soul of an individual. He's lighting up somebody's soul. So what he wants to do, what he's being told to do, and what he did, in fact, was he was assisting that soul to light up until it was burning on its own. Then he stood back. Very, very important, two very important rules in education and instruction and guidance and so on and so forth. The one is that you have to keep your candle, holding that candle alight until it lights up on its own. But once it lights up on its own, you have to step back. It's true with children. You instruct children and you guide them and you direct them, but once they have their direction, you step back and let them burn on their own. Let them give light on their own. Let not their light be overshadowed by your light. Their light has to shine on its own, and that way, let me just stop that phone for 1 minute. Okay. So those are the two rules. Make sure that it's lit up. That once it's lit up, the soul of another person, child, a disciple, a student, or whatever it is, once the soul is lit up, you step back and let it burn on its own. That's okay. So that's one teaching. That's the first meaning of this word here, Ba'alotzah. When you cause the lights to go up on their own. That's the way Rashi explains it. In other words, when Aaron lights the candelabra and ensures that they are burning on their own, then he steps back. The second interpretation is that there is a little sort of platform for him to set of stairs for him to climb up in order to light the menorah. And the reason for that is not that Aaron was short. He wasn't short. He didn't really need, technically, to ascend a stair in order to do it. The meaning here is that when a person is attempting to light up somebody else's soul and is instructing somebody, he has to be able to see that person as someone that he has to ascend to. In other words, if one sees one's students as inferiors, or one's children as inferiors, or one's colleagues, whatever, as inferior, and I have to look down on you because I'm taller than you, so to speak, spiritually, physically, whatever it might happen to be, and I'm looking down on you, that is not the way you're going to get them to light up. The way you get people to light up, obviously one has to take the proper care, and there's rules in how you do it, and when you do it, and what you do, and so on and so forth. But one of the extremely important components is you have to ascend to them. Because really their souls are, anybody's soul has an advantage over your own. You might have many advantages over theirs too. But in their thing that they're here for, the reason for their existence in this world is something that you don't have. Otherwise, you would be them, or they would be you. Each person is unique in the sense that there were 7 candles over there. Each candle was a unique candle. If this candle over here would have said, for example, well, what do I need? I don't have any job in the world over here. There's another 6 candles. There's another candle right next to me. What do I need to do anything for? No. Each candle representing 7 different types of soul powers, each candle was unique. And that has to be recognized as being unique by having this platform that you have to climb up, a set of stairs that you have to climb up in order to light it up. So Aaron ascended the stairs, and that's how he managed to light up the soul, because his attitude towards people was that they have something to teach me. Of course I have something to teach them, and something to give them, but they have something from which I can learn as well. And that's in fact the way he used to do things. There's an expression that the sages say, I learned much from my teachers. I learned much from my colleagues. But more than anything, I learned from my students. That's a proper attitude towards students. Now, don't start getting uppity over there. You guys on the other side of the mic. Just kidding. So, in any event, that is one of the teachings that those are two of the teachings that we see over here. So now, let me explain it in terms of another aspect of the things that Aaron was doing. The next verse, the verse after this, says, Vaya'as Cain Aharon. And Aaron did so. Now the word Cain over here in Hebrew, generally we translate as yes. It's the opposite of law. Right? If you want to say no, you would say law. Lamed Aleph. I didn't attach my pad over here. Alright. Lamed Aleph is law, and Kaf Nun is Ken. Right? Yes and no. Interestingly enough, Rashi is one of the classical commentators on the Torah from the 11-1200s. One of the classic commentators, and Rashi says as follows on this verse here, Vaya'as Cain and Aaron did so. The Rashi comments, L'lamed shivcho shel Aharon, to teach you about the praises, or to express the praises of Aaron, shelo shina, that he didn't change anything. Now, the way that's usually explained is as follows. Our Aaron followed the exact recipe. He didn't change the recipe. Right? There was a certain order in which he had to do things, a certain way in which he had to do things, to light the menorah, and he did it exactly according to the formula. He didn't change a thing. Why should he? Or why would you think that he might have changed something? Because it was such a tremendous level of spiritual ecstasy when he was doing this that you would maybe think that he's going to sort of break out in a dance or do somersaults or start singing or whatever it is, and he's not going to be able to contain himself, and he's going to give a little bit of his own thing. He's going to put some of himself into what he's doing. So it explains that Vaya'as Cain Aharon, Aaron did exactly what Lo Shina. Yeah, he didn't change anything. He did it exactly the way it was supposed to be done, which is a great thing. Because very often we want to put our own personal stamp on something, and sign your name over here, your sort of graffiti or your signature, whatever it is on the wall or on the this or the that, wherever you Joe was here, that kind of thing. And Aaron did not do that. He kept himself completely, as far as that's concerned, out of the picture. He didn't have to have his individual stamp on things. He did as he was instructed by God. But there's a deeper meaning to this as well. I say that the word Ken is the opposite of the word law. Rashi says, Shivchosh, the praise of Aaron shelo shina, that he didn't change anything. That's one way you could read it. In Hebrew, you can read words with a slightly different tone, and they mean something different. So I'm going to read it with a different tone. Melamed shelo shina. Aaron changed the no. You could read it as Aaron did not change anything. You could also read it as Aaron changed the no. He changed the no into yes. Vaya'as Cain Aharon, he changed the law into Ken. He changed the no into yes. Now, what does that mean? So Aaron was the type of person who was very, first of all, was extremely humble. To see, this whole concept of going up the steps in order to light up someone who was, in terms of his achievements, in terms of his spiritual level, was almost without a doubt. Technically speaking, was a lower level than Aaron, no question. But he didn't feel it that way. So, when a person was in a negative state, in other words, when he was in a state of rejection, when he was rejecting the sort of outreach, when he was rejecting his role as a candle of God, when he was rejecting his role as part of a much bigger picture, part of a whole candelabra, part of a whole system, when there was any way that he was saying, no, I'm not going to have any part in this, what Aaron did was to make his no into a yes, right? In other words, he encouraged him, and he spoke to him, and he did whatever was necessary to lift the person up from no into yes. That's also the concept of Ha'alotcha, when you lift up the people, when you lift up their souls, when you lift up the candles, which are the souls, when you ascend, when you make the light ascend and you ascend to make the light, then you can change the no into yes. You can change the negativity into positivity. We all have negativity. Negativity really comes from, essentially it comes from our desire for self-protection in one way or another. And that's part of the animal soul, and it is a necessary thing, but only within certain limitations. It's necessary for our safety, but not more than that. So sometimes we limit ourselves and we hold ourselves back and we prevent ourselves from developing and from moving and from lighting up because we're worried about some imaginary consequences that might happen. That really is, that no, I'm not going to do it, really comes from the animal part, the animalistic part of ourselves. In other words, from the completely self-protecting, natural but limited part of our beings. The word nature, we've spoken about it before, ha-teva, teva is nature, is also related to the word to drown. Tub'u b'yam suf, they drowned in the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds, right? They drowned, the Egyptians drowned in the sea. Tub'u. Tub'u means to be sunken into the waters. So that's what habits and teva, our nature, can do. It can cause us to sink and not float above. That's the danger, and the nature is there. It's a necessary component of our existence, and we need it. On the other hand, it can be something that holds us back and causes us to sink and to drown and to not be fully expressive of our light potential. And that is one of the things that Aaron was doing as well. That was one of the things that he did in this world, was he made a no into yes. Now, how did he do that? He did it with a tremendous amount of love and with a tremendous amount of compassion and a tremendous amount of wisdom as well, obviously. He was a very wise man. And he figured out ways to make sure that a person who was in the negative mode of being would be transformed into a positive mode of being. Okay, questions. Why did he and his brother not make it into the promised land? Very, very good question. Why did they not make it into the promised land? One of the reasons for that is, according to some of the Hasidic masters, they explain that had Moses made it into the land, or Moses and Aaron made it into the land, then when the time of the destruction of the temple occurred, there wouldn't have been a destruction of the temple, it would have been a complete destruction of the Jewish people, because they were thrown out of the land for not observing the Torah the way it's supposed to be observed, and they were sent into exile, and the temple was destroyed. Had Moses and Aaron been there, the settlement would have been permanent, and therefore the Jewish people would have been completely destroyed. So in other words, it was, in a way, a blessing in disguise, that they were not allowed to go in. In the future they will go in. Yael says, one of the things on your bucket list, and may God please help me, is to be like Aaron. That's a fantastic goal to attempt to achieve, Yael. It is tremendously. Rabbi spoke on what? Oh, on Aaron and Moses not going to Moshe and Aaron and Aaron not going to the land. Yep. Right. Alan says in Psalm 106 it says because they were sad about their sister's death. Her name means rebellion. We think about that a lot. Her name means rebellion. Miriam. I don't know where they got that from. Her name does not mean rebellion. That would have been with a dalet in it. It would have been Miriam. It would have, but her name is Miriam, which is really from the word bitterness. Yes, there was a certain bitterness over there. But rebellion, I've never seen such a commentary. So, I haven't seen a commentary that said that they were sad about their sister's death. I mean, she had died sometime before, so, she died and then Aaron died and then eventually Moses. Why would they be destroyed? Because holiness would have been such on such a high level that when they sinned, they would just not have been able to remain in this world. That's why God plans these things ahead of time. In other words, that could have been the consequence, that they would have been destroyed. But God, foreseeing that they were going to not do everything that they were supposed to do, planned things a little bit differently. There's a lot of explanations about the exile. Maybe one day, in a couple of months, we might do that. When we talk about during the 3 weeks, we might discuss that more. But that is the situation. Okay. Any other questions? Alright. So you suppose that one sees in one other the greatest self and therefore desires to light the candle, or are able to continue on their own. Yeah, when you say their greatest self, in other words, the greatest self of the other person, yes. That's certainly the way Aaron saw it. He saw their greatest potential and saw it as his duty to help light that up, yes. We're not distraught about the death of sages. I wouldn't say they weren't distraught about it. I wouldn't say that that's true, necessarily, Yael. Distraught would be the wrong word to use. Certainly, they were sad about the death of other sages, certainly. Distraught, they probably weren't, you're probably right. But anytime that a sage passes away, it really means that it's the end of an era of a certain, depending who the sage was. But when the sage passes away and another one comes in his place, I'll tell you a funny story actually regarding this. Yeah, we say have not broken up. Yeah, right, yeah. You gotta go on. Life goes on, and just because the person is no longer with us in the physical world doesn't mean they're not there. Right? The soul is still there. The soul is indestructible. It never just passes on to a different existence. But in any event, there's a certain Hasidic dynasty called the Guerra Dynasty. Hasidic Ger or Gur. Depends on where you come from, how you pronounce it. Yeah? Hasidic Ger or Gur. Could be with a U instead, right? With a U instead. That's an R, by the way. Here, right? See the Ger or Gur. So when one of the, I don't remember which one it was, but when one of the, there was a dynasty that still goes on till today. But one of the Guerra Rebbes, the spiritual leader, passed away. So his son took over. And it's not always the son that takes over. Sometimes son-in-law, sometimes the son, sometimes the disciple. Whatever, it happened to be that his son took over. Now, when he took over, so the what do you call it, the gabbai, how do you call it, the gabbai? The assistant, yeah? The assistant of the previous one, the one that passed away, so the new rabbi, the new Rebbe, a Rebbe is a Hasidic leader. It's not just a rabbi, but it's called a Rebbe. It's more than a rabbi. It's a whole. It's a different thing. Anyway, whatever. So the Guerra Rebbe, the new Guerra Rebbe, continued with the same assistant. Now, the new Rebbe started making various changes in the way things were run in his court, and especially in the yeshiva, in the house of study, which was under his auspices. So the Gabbai, the assistant, came to the rabbi and he said, with all due respect, or whatever people usually say in those kind of circumstances, with all due respect, if it was good enough for your father to leave the arrangements the way they were, why do you have to change things? It's good enough for your father, why is it not good enough for you? So the Guerra Rebbe told him two answers. Right? I have two answers to your question. One, the Guerra Rebbes were known to be always very sharp, very sharp, and sometimes sharp-tongued as well. But that was their way of doing things. So it wasn't in a negative way, but it was, they got you to understand the truth very quickly. Anyway, so the Guerra Rebbe now says to his assistant, he said, I have two answers for you. One answer is, if my father's way of doing things would have still been valid, he would have continued to live. The fact that he passed away means that it's time for some changes. That's the first answer. Second answer is, usually, when they change the rabbi, they change the assistant also. See, it was a not such subtle warning, but in any event, why did I say that story? I don't know, but what that had to do with. So yes, when Aaron and Moses passed along, when they passed into the world of truth, or when any sage passes into the world of truth, into the world of eternity, whatever you want to call it, the world of souls, Garden of Eden, whatever. So certain changes come about in the world. Certain new things generally start to take place, and it happens over a period of time. But it becomes clear that why it was that new leadership was in a sense necessary. So there are 7 soul groups as well as 7 emotive powers. And if so, how does the 12 tribes of Israel fit into that? Being soul groups. Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very good question, Kimberly. The 12 tribes were, how shall I say, the 12 tribes were also part of that same structure, but it's a bit more of a complex structure in the following way. Let me just show you what I mean over here. If you draw a box, right? Let's say you're drawing a box, right? Well, you get my meaning. Drawing on one of these things is not my forte, I must admit. Alright, you're drawing a box, right? Now, if you count up the sides of the box, how many sides are there? Well, there's the front, there's the back of the box, that's 2. There's the side and there's the other side, that's 4. There's the bottom and there's the top, 6 sides, right? These are called sometimes the 6 sides of space, and so on. Nevertheless, let me just extend the session for another 5 minutes or so. Nevertheless, those aren't only the connections. So these 6 sides of space represent the 6 midot, right? The 6 emotional qualities of the soul. But then there are what's called gule alakson. In other words, the cross, how do you call it? When you want to connect the top left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner, etc., then you sort of draw a line that way and draw a line that way and draw a line from there to there, and so on and so forth. And that makes up altogether 12 12 lines. There's 12 lines altogether. So 12 lines, those are the 12 tribes. Because a tribe wasn't just a unitary necessarily, wasn't just a unitary experience. If you have a look in, let me just upload from the desktop. There. Svirot, I think here we are. Let's see here. All right, so you have the same structure over here. You see that there's pathways joining these things. You count up the number of pathways over here between the 6 emotional qualities, whatever, right? You'll find that there's 12 paths altogether. That is the 12 tribes. In other words, including the nodes, but including the nodes and the connections. Yes? Okay. Some other people have been typing stuff. I think 12 edges. Yeah, that's 12 sides, right? 12 edges, exactly. That's how you would explain it. If you were looking at a box, it would be the 12 edges, yes. Diagonals, that's the word I was looking for. Right. Okay, so in other words, the interconnection between them adds another few dimensions. That's basically what we're saying. All right. Any other questions? Now, next week I'm going to be out of town, so there will not be a class on Wednesday. 7 is to 6, like 13 is to 12. Maybe. There won't be a class on Wednesday. I'm going out of town on Wednesday morning. No, on Wednesday afternoon, like before the class. So there won't be a class Wednesday, but there will be a class this Sunday, and there will not be a class next Sunday because I'll still be out of town. Thank you very much. If anyone wants to organize a trip, a speaking tour, or whatever it is, I do go on speaking tours every now and then. It costs something, but it's not outrageous. In any event, if anyone wants, let me know. And again, if you want a sponsorship, let me know. And thank you very much, Ruby. Thank you, Alaya, rather. Okay. Okay, folks, have a good one. So those who come to class on Sunday, see you Sunday. Otherwise, in 2 Wednesdays' time. Alrighty. All the best. Night, night.